Okay, well, maybe I'll get going. I think that typically, since I take a couple of minutes, more folks trickle in, and they're not missing much if they're missing me talking instead of our presenter. So I'll go ahead and get it going. So good afternoon, everybody. I'm David D'Arsa, president of the Seattle Revit User Group. Welcome to another online session like we've been lately. I don't really have an update for you on when we might be in person. Last I heard was July is what we're targeting. Don't really know yet. Hopefully we have another update about that here as we get closer to July. But in any case, welcome to another online SeaRUG. It's my pleasure to host you, I guess. It's too bad that we can't feed you lunch like we usually do, but we'll get back to that eventually. As usual, I'll get through my slides here pretty quickly and get you on to the main event, which is what you all came for. So let's get that show on the road. Today's agenda, we've got a new presenter, new sponsor. We had a presentation hosted by ATG before earlier this year, but they are back with another partner, which is CTC Software, which is new to SeaRUG, new to me. So this will be interesting information to learn about. And we're going to be taking a look at some of their tools around content management and learn some best practices around that and what they have to offer. So I'm excited to see this. As always, a really big thank you to all of our sponsors. You're the ones that make this possible and bring the presenters and support the group. And some of you have been with us for a really long time. So we really appreciate it. Also, big thank you, of course, to the rest of the SeaRUG board that helps put these meetings together. And you all know who you are. So thank you from me. And just a reminder, as always, to check out the YouTube channel, subscribe, like, all those things help drive content and push our reach farther beyond just our Seattle region. So it's great. If you miss part of this presentation, you want to see it again, you want to share it with colleagues, probably within a day or two. That's typically how quickly I've been getting these things up on the channel after they've happened. So check it out. Just simply enter the URL or search for SeaRUG on YouTube, and it'll pop up. And with that, hopefully I broke a record. I just wanted to give a huge thank you to Justin at ATG and to CTC Software. And I'm going to just shut up, let you enjoy the show, and hand it over to Sean from CTC, who's going to walk us through today's presentation. Thank you very much.
Thank you, David. I want to start out by saying, I like to interact with people. So by all means, if you've got questions, throw them into the questions pane or into the chat window, and I will do my absolute best to try to answer those questions in line. I have the chat window up, the questions window up, and I'll try and keep an eye on that while we go. So today we're going to be talking about efficient Revit content management, right? That's the name of today's topic. Before I jump into it too far, I want to give you a little bit of credentials about me so you know who it is who's presenting to you. Not everybody knows who Sean Zerbis is. Some days Sean doesn't know who Sean Zerbis is. So I've been the technical evangelist for CTC Software since January of 2000, basically. I have been working quite heavily with planning implementations, with helping companies get better at BIM in the AEC industry ever since then. Most of that time I worked for a reseller, and just recently, in the past few years, we stopped being a reseller and started focusing directly on app development on top of Revit exclusively, because we noticed a huge shortage of abilities in the Revit environment. No, well, we didn't just notice it, but we've noticed it for a while. And so we've been doing these custom solutions and primary publicly available tools. So let's jump back over to the topic, what we're going to talk about today. David had this up on his slide, but I'm going to talk about this again. Very frequently in the world of BIM management, I hear people say things like, well, I don't have time to do this the right way, air quotes, or just get it done. We got to get out the door, right? We hear these types of things all the time. And it really creates a lot of problems in our space. We have families that don't schedule correctly. We have content that doesn't view properly, things that are invisible in views that shouldn't be invisible in views. Users don't browse our network for the right pieces of content. When they do, they sometimes don't find the right thing. When they, don't find what they want right away, they'll go to old projects that might be out of date. They might go to manufacturer sites, and they try to just fit this in, to their projects from anything that they found. And the more and more that I talk with BIM managers, this really is a way to guarantee that your building information models are going to break in some form. I mean, you're not likely to have breakages. You're almost guaranteed to have problems. And it then causes us, the BIM managers, those of us who are, in today's session, most likely you're here because you want to get better at BIM, because you're the manager at your firm, because you're responsible for setting those standards. And this is a great way for us to be distracted from actual BIM management and more focused on being firemen, putting out fires here and there, because when something goes wrong, it becomes our responsibility to fix it. And the more things that go wrong, the less we can fix the original source of the problem. So what's the solution? Now, I'm going to disclaim this a little bit later on here, but I believe we've got a great set of tools. But I'm going to talk workflows throughout the entire discussion today. But we have great tools that are available for you, the BIM managers, to very effectively, very efficiently maintain and manage your content, your standards, as effortlessly as is possible. There's plenty of other tools out there. They do some things similar, but we feel we've got a great set, which is why I'm working where I am and why I'm going to talk about some of our tools today that can help you out in this space. I encourage you to do some diligence and to look for other solutions that might exist and see kind of how they might fit the bill for you as well. But here's the deal. After you fixed all your content, you also have to distribute that to your team. You have to get it out there. They have to be able to find it, to use it, to be able to consume what you've done. And so there's other tools that we offer that helps you do that as well. And this way, in the future, you're far less likely for your designers to find the wrong piece of content, far more likely for them to find the right piece of content, because it's easier. It's the path of least resistance. And that's what I find people tend to follow, is the path of least resistance. And so they can use that right piece in developing their building information model. And a lot of those other tedious tasks, they become a lot less common, a lot less prevalent, because they're using the correct things in the first place. And so you, the BIM manager, aren't tracking down and putting out fires all day long. You can actually focus more on establishing and improving upon the standards instead of just constantly nitpicking on these little things here and there. So with that, I want to kind of cover the exact steps that I'm going to go through today. I have sort of a 4-part little discussion. We're going to talk about some general best practices where I'm going to be completely tool agnostic. I'm not going to talk about my stuff in part 1. In part 2, I'm going to talk about some tools that can help you automate some of these things. We'll understand what needs to be done, and you can do them completely by hand if you want to. In part 2, I'm going to talk about how to automate some of those tedious tasks. In part 3, I want to talk about the issue of distributing this content out, some of the roadblocks and hurdles that many of us run into. And in part 4, I want to talk about one technique you can leverage to more effectively distribute this out to your team. And again, before I get into this too much, I like to throw these disclaimers out there. This is very Autodesk-esque, but I'm going to be sharing with you certain views and opinions and workflows and techniques in this session, in this sort of class, so to speak, that are my views. These are things that I believe fairly strongly in, and you'll probably hear that come through in how I talk about some of this stuff. This is not necessarily representative of Autodesk. This is not representative necessarily of the leadership of SeaRUG. This is Sean Zerbis's, pure views of how a Revit production environment can and should be set up because of experiences that I've had in the past, couple 20 some odd years. I will be showing some examples, but I do always encourage you to do diligence of your own. Go find out, are there other ways of doing this that might be better in some circumstances? Not everything is always 100% in all cases. There's some good generalities, and I'll talk about those primarily today. But I'm going to be sharing these views and the automation tools from my point of view, because I represent a company who writes tools, and we're all in the business to make money so we can feed our families, right? That's the whole way this plays. So that's what I'll be talking about. But I'm going to talk about these ideals and these options, these opinions as we go through. So with that, let's get in. And like I said, I'm watching the questions thank you, Michael. I'm watching the questions window and the chat window. So if you do have comments or you're like, Sean, you're completely off base, that's fine. Throw that in there, and I'm okay with that. I also will be leaving some time at the end for Q&A. So we can actually have a formal Q&A if I don't actually answer your question in line with what I'm talking about. So let's talk about an overview of best practices. And one other disclaimer, I'm not normally a death by PowerPoint guy, but the vast majority of today's discussion is going to be PowerPoint and me talking about things, and then there will be some demonstration in software of some, repairing of some stuff. Okay, so best practices overview. Number one, shared parameter files. I believe very strongly that shared parameter files are the foundation of building information modeling, especially as it relates to Revit, because it's a very Revit-centric feature and function. But if that is unsavory in your firm, everything else about the building information modeling process is going to be trouble if your shared parameter files aren't nice, neat, and clean. Now, I use the term files in plural in this first part because every company represented here will have their own file, singular, but that's across all of our firms, multiple files. And that leads me to one point about shared parameter files is each of your firms, your firm individually should have one shared parameter file. Ideally, you don't want to have one per discipline, one per practice group, one per office, one per project. Like, don't do that. That's bad news. You should have one shared parameter file. And I am very aware that many of our firms have more than one shared parameter file at play. And that is in part why some of our content sometimes is a little bit inconsistent because there's multiple files, sometimes the same named shared parameter in more than one shared parameter file. And then it's based on a different global unique identifier or GUID, or maybe the data type is a little different, or the names are similar but not the same. And now all of our content looks and works and feels differently and doesn't schedule right and doesn't tag right. And that's a huge problem. The best way to handle that problem is one shared parameter file so you have a single source of truth you commonly go back to. I'm also fully aware that some of us work on projects where the client, our client, the building owner, provides us a shared parameter file, and that's fine. On those projects for those teams, because we're doing something that's very specific to that customer, you can use that shared parameter file, but really you shouldn't be doing anything with that shared parameter file because they should be giving you all of their content in that case, and you're just using that. One side note about shared parameter files that some people don't fully understand is that shared parameter files are not live read by Revit while you're doing your design. Think of a shared parameter file like a recipe book at holiday dinner. Grandma's got this fantastic apple pie, right? Grandma used the recipe book. Maybe my grandma never used a recipe book because something about her head had everything in it. I don't know, whatever. But there's the recipe book, right? And when she's making the pie, that recipe is being used. But when you're sitting there and consuming the pie at the table, you're not reading the recipe at that time, right? And Revit's the same way. Shared parameters are used while you're authoring family content, while you're authoring tags, potentially building up a custom schedule or a new template. But then when you're done with that and users are consuming that content, that shared parameter file does not need to be used by them at all, really, at all. Okay, enough on that soapbox. Loadable family content, that's another major thing. In fact, that's the next step up, I should say, up the BIM ladder, is that loadable family content, because the vast majority of what we draw in most of our models is loadable RFAs, whether it be tags, whether it be, component families like doors or columns or you name it, whatever the RFA type is you're loading, that's a loadable piece of family content. And that loadable family content should, as much as possible, be based on your shared parameter file, singular, at your firm. And if that content is built in a consistent way with the same parameters, the same types of formulas, the same instance and type settings, and similar groupings, it makes it far easier for your team to use that content in the same way over and over again. Now, of course, we've got hundreds, if not thousands, of families at play. And it's a whole lot of fun to manually, one by one, open up those families and modify and correct any parameters that might be in there incorrectly, or to clean up some of the materials inside of there, or improve upon the functionality because it's one by one, family by family. And so that's a tedious thing to do. Oh, and I didn't mention this before, with shared parameter files, kind of taking one step down that ladder, it's kind of difficult really to go in there and edit shared parameter files, because they're a text file, but the first line in there says don't edit manually. If you make a mistake in the shared parameter file, you can actually break it and make it not usable, at which point, I mean, if it's not usable, you can't use it by definition, I guess, right? That's kind of the way that goes. So you got to be careful with those. Combining them together can be tricky. It can be dangerous sometimes. Again, you can break them. And so it's a manual process that you can do if you do it right. Doing it wrong can have some pretty bad effects. Loadable family content, again, you can absolutely do that by hand. It just takes a lot of time. And so many of us don't have time to go through a 4,000 family library, which many of us have, if not more, and clean them all up, right? That takes time. So then there's also system family content. This is the content that exists exclusively within a project model. It's the wall types, the floor types, the duct types, those kinds of things, the view types. And those all have parameters as well, usually project-based parameters, hopefully shared project parameters if it's from a shared project or shared parameter file. But all of that content has to be maintained and in a standard way. And we've got typical schedules that shows the data, the information about these things in a spreadsheet-like environment, in a schedule that we put on sheets and use for design purposes. And those schedules have to be based on those shared parameters. And you need to make sure that they're all using the correct shared parameters, because if you have loadable family content that gets brought in your project and they're all based on different shared parameters, then you end up with like 3 or 4 or 5, sometimes I've seen up to 20 of the same exact, frame material or frame finish on door components. And then you get to play parameter roulette with fixing that, because you've got so many parameters at play from multiple different shared parameter sources. And that can be frustrating as a BIM manager. So typical schedules need to be put together in a clean, consistent way so users can pull in what's known good and then build upon that if they need to change anything, or ideally just use it if it's a part of your standards. And then, of course, there's typical details and typical sheets, because many of us have projects that we do over and over in the same region. We draw the same details over and over, unless, of course, we've got a library of those details. In a lot of cases, those came from AutoCAD or are coming from AutoCAD. And as BIM managers, we want those standards to be clean as well, because if they're not, and somebody goes and grabs a typical detail and brings it to my project and it's not based on my standard, I get a whole bunch of extra line styles and potentially text types and dim types that muddy up the standards in my project and increase file size and decrease my ability as an end user to navigate. And the assembly of sheets can take time. So typical sheets needs to be something that's in your standards environment as well. And assembling those in a clean way that can be consumed by users is very important. Now, I personally recommend that you put all of your system family content, all of your typical schedules, all of your typical details, your typical sheets, and some of the other things like model and detail groups in a warehouse project file or a container project file. So as a BIM manager, you can edit all of that from one location. Of course, if you do that, and your users have to navigate to that file to open it, there's a potential that they could start tweaking your standards if they know where that file is and start manipulating that in a way that you don't want. Or if the file gets to be too big, then it becomes inconvenient for them to open it. So then what we do as BIM managers a lot is we break it apart into multiple sub-files so that the system family content may be in its own isolated environment, and the typical details and sheets are in their own isolated environment. Maybe the schedules are in their own isolated environment. The model and detail groups are in their own isolated environment. But the problem then becomes when we make it change the standards or improve upon our standards, we have to potentially go to 4 or 5 or 6 or more files to start making those kinds of changes. And as humans, we're really bad at making the same change over and over and over again. We get distracted. We might make a tweak in one way and in one file and a different way in a different file, and then things don't actually combine together in a project environment correctly. This is why I recommend in most cases that you have as few standards warehouse files as possible, where everything is in one file and you maintain it from there. But again, we got to find a way to distribute that to our users in a way that's meaningful for them so that they're not encumbered by a 500 meg model they have to open up every time they want a typical detail, right? And they have to be able to navigate that. Model and detail groups are another major aspect of standards. I love model groups. I love detail groups and attached detail groups, and you have to have an easy way to get them from one project to another. If you do typical layouts of patient rooms in medical facilities, model groups can be fantastic as a starting point for patient room type A, B, or C. They can be great for different kinds of layouts like educational facilities or laboratory equipment or mechanical equipment in a pump room. You can get those model groups pre-ready pre-connect it up, drop them into a project and make connections and do your modeling much, much more effectively when you ungroup a model group. You're using it kind of like a collection or a block of content. And then the attached detail groups for annotations. Fantastic tool set, but all of that has to be able to be found and consumed by your users. So best practices, again, keep them in the same file so people have one place to go to find the things and they can bring them across into their environment if you're not distributing it some other way. And then finally, the last best practice that I recommend is leveraging starter projects as your template. Revit has a template structure itself. It's an RTE file, a Revit template, a project template, but there's some limitations with project templates. Like you cannot have work sharing enabled in a project template file, a normal RTE. And I strongly recommend enabling work sharing because many of us work together on projects and we create the same work sets over and over again. The other thing it lets you do is have links pre-placed in your model as placeholder links. They're not real models yet. They're just like a placeholder thing that's placed origin to origin on the right work set if work sets exist, pinned in place, and then all a person has to do is reload from. And that can save a lot of time because then a part of that, you can also have view templates pre-configured in your starter project that knows about the links, potentially knows about work sets for some validation if people are drawing on the correct work set. And all of that can flow smoothly, but that can only really happen to the highest level if you have work sharing enabled, which means you have to be using an RVT project file with work sets enabled and all those settings pre-configured in your starter project template. Those are general best practices, right? I just rifled off a whole bunch of stuff to you and you're like, oh man, this is gold. Or you're like, oh, this is old hat. We already do this stuff. Great. But how do you manage it? Are you managing it well? Is it going good? Do you have a pristine library that has no problems? I mean, most of us don't. Most of us have problems here and there, and we need a way to go pick up and clean those issues. So let's talk about how we can maintain some of this. This is part 2 where I talk about some tools. Again, there maybe are other tools in industry that can do some of what these tools can do. In this case, I'm kind of subliminally messaging you by having the brand of the suite of our tools up here at the top. So BIM Manager Suite right there is kind of what I'm going to be talking about mostly today. But I'm going to jump over into Revit and we're going to talk a bit about some of these tools here. I'm up on the CTC Software tab, and what I'm going to focus on primarily is the BIM Manager Suite, and I'll talk a little bit about this BIM Batch Suite. But what I want you to focus on, instead of talking about, you know, oh, this is a specific tool, and now Sean's getting all salesy, right? We're talking workflow, and we're talking automating a tedious task. That's what we're talking about. And if you want to check out my tools for it, I'll show at the end where you can go do that. Okay, there was a question about how do you set up multiple work sets enabled in a model template, and I'm going to answer that right now because when you first start a project, you know, file, new project, it's going to ask you for a template, and as soon as you use that out-of-the-box template or even your current RTE template, all you have to do is go to the bottom and enable work sharing. If I open that up, and then make whatever work sets it is you want by default in your projects, the template-based work sets that you want to use most of the time or all of the time, and just have them existing. And when you save this project, it's going to be an RVT, a Revit project file. That's what this is up here, an RVT file. And once you save that as an RVT with those work sets, that's your starting point for every future project. That's why I called it a starter project, not a template. It is kind of a template, but it's a starter project because it's a project file in Revit. And to begin with that project, you have to make sure you open detached and then save it in the right place. That starts you in a new project that has nothing drawn in it yet, but it has all these settings that you want them to use. That's the starter project workflow. That's a key thing to do. And in fact, one of the things that I recommend you do is kind of establish your template based on that and your warehouse of you know, system family type content based on that as well. Absolutely, you know, define your project template and your warehouse file this way because you can validate in some cases even schedules and do some filtering and things like that in those views based on some of the work sets potentially. I've seen some pretty intense strategies on how you can do that. Okay, but let's start at the top of that list that I was talking about here. And let's go right down the list. Shared parameters, because again, this is the foundation of all things. And now that you've been in Revit for a while, you probably have a pretty good idea of a lot of the parameters that you want to work with. And you may even understand that you've got multiple shared parameter files at play in your firm. So one of the tools that you should have at your disposal is a tool like our SharedParameter Manager. Its purpose is to allow you to not just create and replace the out-of-the-box shared parameter management, which I can do with this. I can add new parameters, I can delete parameters, I can add groups and rename groups and move things around. But I can also, with this tool, rename parameters. So if I find something that's named silly and I want to change its name, I can actually modify this and I can change the name, which will make a new GUID, a new global unique identifier. And that's fine, as long as you can manage that, which is another tool we'll talk about in a minute. This can allow you to change, what discipline it's associated to, and thereby changing what parameter type, what data type values are stored in here, because Revit's real specific about what you can do with different data types and what they're for. You can modify things like if it's visible or modifiable by users or has a tooltip, and you can modify all of that for every parameter that exists without needing to delete and recreate it. You can also do prefixing and suffixing, finding and replacing, and this is the real key, because remember, I was talking about one shared parameter file, but I know many of you have multiple. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to browse for another shared parameter file that somebody brought into my firm. And I need a way to understand, like, there's these angle and frame depth and frame inset parameters, and there's angle and probably frame depth and frame inset in my main shared parameter file. Are they the same or are they different? I don't know, right? And I need to be able to make some decisions about this. And so I have a little filter here that lets me see things that are duplicate parameters, truly duplicated, and I can isolate this. In this case, frame type, panel type, things like angle, frame depth, these are the same between the two files. They are identical. Same name, same GUID, same data type. There's no conflicts. We're good. But there are times when there are conflicts with the same name, but it's a different GUID. Maybe somebody made it manually and it's not the same. Or there's times when there's unique parameters over here that maybe I want in this shared parameter file. How do I handle that? What can I do to bring them together? Well, out of the box, it's manipulating text files. And hopefully you understand the coding structure of a shared parameter file if you're going to do that. Most people don't. It's kind of frustrating. Here, if I want these parameters, these control parameters in this shared parameter file, I would probably throw them in the other group, which is right here. All I have to do is simply drag and drop them over here, like copying things from one folder to another in Windows. And now those are considered duplicate things because they exist in both places. That was simple, right? That's easy for me as a BIM manager to do some of this. I can also do stuff like when there are conflicts, maybe these are the parameters that I want to get rid of because most of my library is based on these. I can simply highlight a bunch of things here, delete those out of my real shared parameter file, come back up here, show, unique parameters, and then I'm going to grab these things and simply drag and drop them into identity data probably again. And there we go, I'm done. I've made these modifications and I can save this shared parameter file and move on with what I'm supposed to be doing with some other things. I've gotten myself to a single shared parameter file. In a morning, I can make these decisions. It can be very easy, usually less than a morning, and it can save me a lot of time and a lot of headache. There was a question that did pop up, and I'll talk about this in a minute, about adding tooltips to existing shared parameters. Actually, I'll talk about it right now. Can I add a tooltip to an existing shared parameter in a shared parameter file? Absolutely. If I double click on this tooltip, some tooltip thing, whatever, and I can okay that. And the next time this particular shared parameter gets used in a family, when that recipe is used to define that parameter, or if I use one of my other tools to do that for me automatically, that area infiltration parameter will have some tooltip actually show up on the piece of content, right? That's kind of the point of this, is to let me define my parameters and then implement them. So yes, I can absolutely add a tooltip to an already defined shared parameter. And again, those other things, I can change data types. I can change whether it's visible or not when it gets into a project environment. If a user can even modify the data values of air infiltration potentially, if I want to lock it down, I can do that. There's some cool strategies where I can make a family parameter, establish a formula on it, give it maybe a tooltip that says go change data values over here, and then I swap it out for an actual shared parameter where the user modifiable is unchecked, right? And then I okay that and I load that, I swap that into my family in place of that family parameter that I made with all my rules. And now even I, the family author, can't modify that parameter until I swap it back to a family parameter. This is a great way to like lock things down. So even if somebody edits your family out of a project, if they don't know some tricks, they're not a more advanced user, they can't even edit your formulas on things because it's locked, right? And it has tooltips indicating some instructions for them to know how to use your content better. And all of that work that you put in here to help users better leverage your content, you can automatically implement into your families. How? Well, let me show you how next. Because this tool here is purpose-built to take all of those shared parameter management tasks and make them far, far less painful. Not painless, but less painful. There's still effort involved on your side. You still have to make decisions and carry through due diligence on those decisions. But with this, what I'm going to do now is talk about another tool here, Family Processor. This is the tool that answers the next question in line, which is modifying all that loadable family content. How do I manage that as effectively as possible? In the same collection of our tools, one source to purchase, right? Like that's my salesy bit there. You buy it once, you get all these tools that help you do all the things. In this environment, this consistently built tool is purpose-built to work in this workflow of fixing content, shared parameter management, and now family fixing all that content there. So if I go to, say, a component in my floor plan that I know is not working, I'm just going to go pick one directly and edit this family out of my project environment. Normally, my process would be go here to family types, click on something like panel material, go edit my parameter here. And in this case, it tells me it's a shared parameter, which is great. But it also lets me export this parameter, which means it is not currently defined in my shared parameter file. So it's somebody else's shared parameter. And that's a problem. That means that it's not going to schedule correctly. So in this case, if I was to go select the correct shared parameter, I can go browse. In this case, it's the material. So we'll go to materials and finishes here, and I'm going to go find panel material because that's the right name, panel material, and click OK. And now Revit's going to yell at me because whoever defined this parameter made it as a text type of parameter, and my panel material is actually a material type of parameter. This is where that data type thing is really important in Revit. I can't swap it. I have to delete this parameter and recreate it from scratch. And I might have to go through that exercise multiple times for multiple parameters in this family. And that can be frustrating. And I have to do it once for this family, and there's 4 or 5 other families in my same project that has this problem. So that's kind of an issue, right? That means that I have to sit here and one by one do this. There was actually an intern who was put on doing this task in one of my clients' offices, and this poor kid got through about 60 families in a 30-hour work week. That's a half hour per family, which is not unrealistic by any means. Even as an experienced person, that sometimes is faster than I can handle a family, a half hour. Well, if I've got 4,000 families, that's a full year worth of work, full time, doing nothing but editing these families to due diligence on making sure they're using the correct parameters. That's not great. That's not great at all. So how can I make this more automatic? With all these things to go fix, how can I do it quickly? Well, Family Processor is purpose-built to do that. I'm not going to take you through everything in this tool. I'm just going to talk through, because I've already done this once before for somebody else. I've got rules that are set up to delete a bunch of, well, actually, let me start at the beginning. I have the ability to open up a whole bunch of families, a whole series of families, and audit them when I'm opening them. I can, if I choose to, sort parameters by name in groups. I can do work with lookup tables, deleting and importing lookup tables. I can delete materials. I can choose to add materials with properties. I can update the definitions of materials for my own purposes in the family. I can delete parameters. So in this case, I'm deleting panel material, which is a text type. I can add shared parameters. I can add parameters and set formulas and choose the group, and if it's instance or type. I can add family parameters if I need to and replace things with shared parameters, and all of this is super fast. Let me show you how fast this is. Instead of me manually, one by one, browsing to all these things, I'm just going to remove all items here. If I grab things like frame depth and finish and thickness and all these things, panel material, probably height, depth, finish, skip that one because it's text, panel width 1, add these to my list. In my case, because I'm using common naming with my parameter names, this automatically found frame depth in my shared parameter file of the same data type, and it swapped it, automatically made that match. I don't have to do any extra work. It found it. There's a bunch of others here, like panel width 2 and swing angle, right? A bunch of these things here. I was hitting the wrong button on my keyboard. Trim depth, trim thickness, all of these can be added to this list and swapped, and I don't have to do much. And if I need to browse for something like trim plate or base plate here, that's actually, for me, the term I use is threshold. So if I go here, I can go, just T, threshold, the first thing, it's the first yes/no parameter. This looks at my entire shared parameter file and gives me threshold as one of my yes/no options as available to swap. This doesn't take me long. I can change parameters. Like I knew in this family that the frame finish and panel finish, because I investigated it, they were type parameters, and I want them to be instance parameters, so I can update that. Ultimately, at the very end here, I can process just my current file, or if I want, I can process thousands of files. I can tell this thing to go. I can set this up in 20 minutes and tell it to run across a 4,000 family library and walk away to a meeting and come back, and it'll probably be done. That same client I was mentioning, about 60 families in a 30-hour work week, we set this up when I walked into their office in about 20 minutes and told it to run, and it ran in under 3 hours. It finished approximately 4,000 of their families. So 4,000 families in less than 3 hours, or a half hour per family. Like, you can do the maths on this. You just can't be efficient if you have to make a sweeping change, or you're trying to consistently configure a library. This is one of the biggest things that most of us do all the time. This family isn't working, and you open it up and you manually tweak the stuff in the family. And then this next family isn't working, and you tweak that one. And because you're constantly running down those issues, you don't have time to go fix everything. Well, that's what this tool can do, right? There's also, oops, I didn't mean to advance that yet. There's also system family management, right? That's important. Now, there's some things with system families about adding shared parameters, and the shared parameter manager can actually add project parameters to system families. And I have other tools from other suites that can help you manipulate some of the data and modify type naming of those system families based on rule sets. One of those tools that is actually off of the manager suite here is called, well, up here, it's called Spreadsheet Link. And its purpose is to pull data from the model into a spreadsheet and automatically run different kinds of formulas or just basic data entry on that. One of the advanced ways you can use this is for BIM management and for working with those system families to really help clean them up. So I use Shared Parameter Manager to pull the right parameters into my project and make sure that they're correct. And then I use Spreadsheet Link to transfer data from old shared parameters from inconsistent stuff to the correct shared parameters, and to make sure my naming conventions are all right for system families. And heck, I do that with component families as well. Part of my workflow is to load a bunch of families in with a free tool, and then I use Spreadsheet Link to manipulate my data and retain some of the old data. If I want to transition from one data standard, one shared parameter collection to another, I can copy data values across very easily with a tool like that. And it saves me hours and hours, and sometimes weeks and months of time. Schedule management is another big deal, because as you start making these changes, or even right now without making those changes, you want to make sure your schedules are based on your shared parameters. And one of the tools I have for that is called Schedule Parameter Resolver. Now we're going to see if I can get this to work today, because I recently reset some of my data, and I recently went through and swapped out some shared parameters here and there, and I'm not entirely sure if I have the right ones, so we're going to find out together. I have a whole bunch of these door frame schedules, and you can see I'm missing a bunch of data in these columns. My primary schedule works fine. Material and finish working great, but these other level-based ones were duplicated prior to me establishing my new standard, and now these ones aren't working correctly. So my schedule parameter resolver is purpose-built to allow me to go in here and choose all of those schedules, and I'll just do 2 columns here. I'll do door material and swap that out for panel material. I'm going to do door finish and swap that out for panel finish. This is actually pulling parameters from my shared parameter file and giving me those as my selection set. Door finish is supposed to be panel finish. There it is. There it is. Okay. And if I just simply click OK here, instead of me needing to go play parameter roulette from the 3 or 4 different parameters in my project, and instead of having to come back and redo my headers and redo my groupings, because that's what schedules will do when you add a new parameter, this swapped it in place, keeping my headers, my overridden names, and my grouping, and it's using the correct parameter across 6 different schedules in one step. So this makes it a lot more efficient for me to change my mind on a parameter in the morning, implement that into my families, and now implement that into my schedules, and potentially make sure that all of my system families are all up to date and I'm off and running, and I can save my template and my new standards file, and I'm done, right? Like, it's really easy at that point. There's also details management. I'm going to focus on the details portion here. We have a tool in this list called Type Swapper. Its purpose is to go in and swap out different line styles, text types, dimension types that might have crept into your project. So if you've got this warehouse of content and a ton of different line styles that are kind of spread all over the place, or text types from exploded AutoCAD files, you can very easily go through this system and say, hey, look, there's 106 line weight 04s in here. I don't want them to be line weight 04s. I want them to be detail 04. That's my standard now. We changed names. Thin lines. I don't want people using the out-of-the-box thin lines. That's supposed to be detail 02, for example. So I can just very simply tell it to swap these things, and it'll make that swap wherever it exists in my project. I don't have to go through 100 different detail views and make that swap, but I can go ahead and just clean that up. And I can also see which of these are approved line styles and which are not because of the check marks in front. And I can go through and delete anything that I know that I don't want, and just simply delete those line styles out, which takes me a little bit less time than doing it manually in the Revit environment. And now I've cleaned up the trash that's in my standards file, which means that trash isn't making its way into my project files, which means my projects stay cleaner over time, and people can navigate the actual line styles and continue to develop details more effectively. So there's a lot of this stuff here that's going to make these processes a lot faster. Sheet naming, again, I use the spreadsheet link for some of my sheet name management and rapidly just go through and write some formulas for how to name things. That's all a part of that process. Starter project management is basically doing a lot of these things that we just talked about within your starter project as well, or taking your warehouse file and saving it as your starter project and purging out everything that doesn't need to be there to make that file as small as possible, and then letting people start a project from something that's super consistent. Okay, I'm rapidly running out of time, so let's talk about the next topic. Topic number 3 at this point, third point. We've spent all of this time now going through the exercise of developing these standards, and we put them into folders, and we tell our team about them, and what do? They go download stuff from Revit City because reasons. And that's so much fun. Man, that's the greatest thing ever, right? Like, I invest my time. I've spent a month getting my standards all in line, and I got these great tools that help me do it, and people don't even do the right thing. They go find trash. And why do they do that? Well, there's a couple of reasons, especially right now with us working remotely, many of us, right? There's users who silo content on their own computer. They squirrel away their own components that they like to play with, that their teams like to play with, and they just put it on their own system and they use it on their projects, which is great that they believe in a standard that they can use, but that means that somebody else who's from outside their project team doesn't know anything about that, and now that person's all confused about where this came from and how they're supposed to use it because it's not company standard stuff. That's a problem. It's a real problem regardless of if we're working from home or working in the main office. We have people who silo. Also, when we're working from home these days, we have these VPN speed issues. Navigating a network and trying to open up a large warehouse of content across a VPN is slow. So again, we're just encouraging people to silo that content away when they're working from home across a VPN because it's inconvenient, or they'll make their own copy of your standards, but then as your standards change, they never get it because they keep going to their local copies because accessing it is slow, and they know where they put it on their own system because VPN or access speeds. And we also deal a lot with virtual computers, which are great. Virtualized computers can be awesome. It can be a great way to get people working in the office and avoiding the VPN speeds, but then that has extra added expense. And it doesn't really solve the problem of them going to my directory because they still squirrel away their own content because users, that's what people do for whatever reason. So those are all real problems. And there's other issues you may have run into. Client-specific content that's now, related to a particular pet client, and you have to use that. You have to make sure your team is using just that and not other stuff. How do you do that? Because again, they've squirreled away content of their own, and that can be problematic, or they go only to corporate stuff and don't use the client stuff. There's all kinds of issues that users run into in finding the right stuff. And all they have to go on is file name, or if they open up the actual warehouse project file, the type names. And that's not always enough to find what you need. So how do you distribute this? How do you get this content into the hands of your users? Well, there's a couple of different content managers out in the market. And the one, whatever you choose, there's a few things that you really need to consider. Does this content management system allow you to, use it online and offline? So meaning it's hosted on your network or it's hosted in that, consumer's cloud or that provider's cloud. Do they allow basic filtering of content? And is it automatic? Does it automatically have filtering, or is it something that you have to manually set up for that filtration, for those properties to be filterable? Is there ways to automate the actual searches that users are going to run regularly? There has to be some kind of automation of searches. Is there a way to optimize the speed at which users can get access to this content so that regardless of where they are, in your main office, on a virtualized system, working from home, wherever, working from a coffee shop, can they get access to this stuff quickly? Again, if you have a 500 meg warehouse file, do you want that to be streamed across the internet if it's a cloud hosted solution, or across a VPN so it can be cached in the user's computer so that they can actually drop something into their project? I venture you probably don't, which is where many of us go in and start making micro files, which makes our management a lot more difficult. And you really should have some kind of usage reporting. How are they using this tool? How are their projects performing, for that matter? Can you tell how fast their models work as they use your content? That's actually some of the usage reporting that you should really have in some kind of a content management system, because the project is as much content and that data is as much content as the actual families and components they're dropping in. And there's a number of other things. Can it host more than just Revit stuff? Does it work well with Revit stuff? Can it actually search inside of Revit content cleanly? There's really three main competitors really in the market for you to put your own content in. And one of those options is our solution. It's called Hive the CMS right here. I'm going to open this up real quick. This tool set is going to allow me the ability to find whatever I need. And it really should be literally whatever you need. I'm signed in right now as an end user, as Joe, and I have the ability here to go grab a template, well, a starter project. Remember I was talking about starter projects early on? My starter project here allows me to start this up and default to detaching the work sets and preserving detaching the file from central and preserving my work sets. And it even has the prompt here for selectively opening whichever work sets it is I want. As a user is working in this environment, and give me a second here, I need to create some floor plan views because my template is intentionally fairly bare. So I'm going to go ahead and use one of my other tools for end users to develop all of the floor plan types I need for this particular project. Create some views, 20, okay, great. Because of my template, my starter project, my view templates know how to organize themselves in the project browser. And I would recommend that your views do the same. But while I'm drawing in here, I give my users nothing, or basic generic stuff, because I don't know what kind of construction they're going to do. So I give them almost nothing. This is a system family. This is a wall here. And so they have to draw something for design purposes. If I could actually draw, that would be lovely. Here we go. And then when they want to actually use real stuff, I'm going to tell them to come back in here and search for something like type A, right? Find things that match type A. Here's some wall types at my fingertips. And this comes from a warehouse file. In my case, about 250 meg in file size. And it's also in 2018. This just grabbed that 2018 wall type out of that 250 meg warehouse file in a few seconds. That's the kind of performance you want to make sure your team has access to. Whatever your content management solution is, they should be able to find whatever they need fast, isolate down to what they want, automatically filter based on specific Revit categories, potentially Revit versions. If you're working internationally, you might need to have, different units of measure. You need to be able to control what rights to which libraries people can find. And this user has access to 7 libraries, and that's it. And there's a total of about 20 in my environment, but I can control what this user can see. So you want to make sure that whatever your content management system is, that you can do those kinds of things. Also, I didn't mention this, all of my content, because of how I've configured this, is coming from the cloud. This system inherently can do both cloud and not cloud. So if you work on sensitive projects that don't let you put content in the cloud, you can actually use this on both all projects and those sensitive projects, because you can tell it don't upload the content and it works in both environments at the same time. So a lot of benefits here. I certainly encourage you to check this out and dig a little bit deeper. But again, we've only got so much time today, so I can't go deep into everything. So what I want to do instead is kind of give you some extra information, like how you can get your hands on these tools. There's actually 2 places you could go to find this. You can go to my website, ctcsoftware.com, or ATG is sponsoring today. You can go to atgusa.com, and in either case, you can go to our products page. So I've got products here for my tools. ATG does a few more things, and so you can go to CTC tools here for building designers very specifically, and you can get trials. You can do free trials of Hive, of Manager Suite if you want, of Project, of Batch, of any of the tools that we offer. You can register for some of this information. All right, so that's how you can get more data about these tools. And certainly, if you want to know more, even more after we're done with the Seattle Revit user group today, if you want to dig in deep yourself, you can get a hold of me, you can get a hold of ATG. We'll be glad to have some conversations about more about what these tools can do. So that's kind of just a quick how you can get your hands on it, because I don't want to share a bunch of stuff and say you can do all these things and then not tell you how, right? That's not fair. So we talked today a lot about, let's just kind of rewind here a bit. If I can, I can't easily rewind. That's lovely. Well, I'll just kind of click back here. We talked, I didn't put a summary slide in my environment like I usually would do. So we talked about basic best practices, just general practices. We talked about some tools that can help you implement with those best practices. We talked about some problems with content management. We talked about one way you could distribute that content to your team. So that's kind of what we covered today. Hopefully you got some knowledge out of all of this. Hopefully you see some things that might be interesting to you to be able to potentially, I don't know, automate some of your workflows and save yourself some time here, there, and everywhere. So with that, what I want to do is open this up for formal questions. I've answered some of the questions in line while I saw them pop up, but now I want to go in and do a kind of formal Q&A session here for a few minutes, and I'm going to turn it back over to David because I know he's got some closing thoughts. So there was a question about, I'm not sure I understand that question. What nuggets are you using in your programming? Well, we write on .NET, Microsoft.NET, and we have some tools that we leverage that are kind of pre-built tools to help us do things like working with spreadsheets more effectively and things like that. But the vast majority of our code was written from scratch by our development team here in the office. Well, most of those are in the office. Some of them are working from home still, like many of us are, right? If you want to expand upon that question, I would be more than happy to answer it more deeply. I'm not sure I fully understood what you're looking for. We do use some third-party common things for some of our controls, but most of the stuff is just stuff that we wrote directly based on user feedback. In fact, all of our tools are based on user feedback. Let me see here. Are there any other direct questions? Third-party or C# tools? Yeah, so we're doing all C#. .NET, we're doing things like Spreadsheet Gear is what we use for spreadsheet type stuff. We do, we have some licensing tools we use from Reprise, license management. There's a lot of things that we have in there. I can't necessarily list everything, but there's quite a bit. There was a question about ITM parts for fabrication. Right now, Hive does not support ITM parts. And the real problem behind that is because the ITM and fabrication environment is very database focused, last I checked. And to actually be able to consume an ITM part, you have to have the supporting structure in a database as well in the Autodesk ITM database. So I do not currently support ITM parts directly. I will say any file type can be put into Hive. I do have PDFs, I do have DWGs, I do have training videos that I've put into my Hive environment. So can you put an ITM component into Hive? Yes, absolutely. Will it work 100% correctly? Probably not, because you do have that database backend that it does have to work with. Now that is on the roadmap for Hive to actually take a look at ITM parts, but I don't officially have ITM fabrication level part support that I can honestly say to you today it's going to work perfectly. So while I would like to say I can, I don't have that just yet. All right. Not seeing any other new questions, I don't think, coming through. There's a question about timeline for 2022 support. And a second question in that same line about cloud-based licensing. 2022 support is actually scheduled for, we're a bunch of nerds here at CTC, so, you know, you guys will understand this, but the 4th of May is when we are planning on releasing all of our tools in 2022 for all of our suites. We're actively kind of refining based on the latest update from Autodesk, that fully released version of Revit. So we'll be ready here in just a couple of weeks. As far as cloud-based licensing, that's going to come a little bit later on this year. We're working very quickly here to try to get to cloud-based licensing. We understand that normal network licensing can be frustrating, especially in this work-from-home environment with VPN. And so we are actively working toward getting cloud-based licensing into our tools. And that way you won't have to worry about VPN tunnels and single user stuff. So yeah, that's all kind of being handled. There was a question about how you can contact me after the meeting. Honestly, the best possible bit of information I can give you is go through our site, ctcsoftware.com, and contact us through here. We have a little chat system. You can get a hold of us, and you can get myself or one of my other application engineers or ATG application engineers to talk with you more about these tools. So feel free to get a hold of us that way. You can also just email us directly. There's an email sales right here to get access to me as well. Okay. I don't think there's any other questions. So with that, I want to say thank you all. I really appreciate the opportunity to come in front of you and kind of talk about some workflows and potentially talk about some tools that you can use to help improve upon those workflows. And hopefully you guys like this information enough to talk to me a bit more and or invite me back for a future SeaRUG, because I'd love to talk with you guys more on topics you find interesting. So with that, I'm going to stop sharing. And I'm going to let David kind of take the floor, because I know he's got some final closing thoughts that he wanted to throw out there as well.
All right. Thank you very much, Sean. That was really enjoyable, really great. And I like the questions too. And I guess I do have one question for you. President of the SeaRUG group and all that stuff, and over 20, nearly 25 years now in Revit. I hadn't heard of CTC Software, and this is fantastic. I'm kind of wondering if you can tell us a little bit, just ever so briefly, about where you come from and where this group has sort of emerged from. And it's not part of the usual suspects, and it's really refreshing and really great.
Yeah, absolutely. Do you want me to tell more about where we came from right now, or in a future session?
If you have something quick that you can give us about, sort of how long CTC has been around and
yeah, for sure. So CTC has been around now for a bit over 25 years. We started out as we started out as a support-based company, helping people implement AutoCAD back 25 years ago. And Autodesk approached us and asked us to be a reseller. We took that on and found that support is the best way, and partnering and giving technical expertise is the best way to help people improve. And from that, and from our experiences in support, we picked up Revit and started working with them in 2001, 2002, well before Autodesk bought them, and have been working with that ever since we believe very much in the Revit environment. And as soon as there was an API, we started developing, and that now is where we are today. We stopped being a reseller because there was too much politics involved in resellership, and we wanted to focus mostly on just writing tools to help advance BIM. So that's kind of the quick nickel tour of CTC. I've been here for 20 of the little more than 25 years. So
fantastic.
22 of the 25 years.
No, I appreciate that background. That's fantastic. It's really refreshing, and welcome to the SeaRUG family. I'm very, very happy to have ATG and CTC as part of the group. And this is really great information, and it seems like a great product. Definitely will be checking it out deeper. So yeah, with that, really big thank you to you, Sean, for presenting today. A really great presentation, and hopefully more to come, like you said.